Welcome back to the system and our closeout for the 4th week in July. And so it's the end of Total Solar Day on the 28th today. And normally I close out on the 29th, but we've got a situation going on right now that is something that we had discussed a few months back. We knew this decision point was going to come at some point during the height of summer. And we'll probably see several days like this in August as well. Now, what's happened is that because of the warm weather, we've gotten up to about 104 degrees today. It has lowered the efficiency of the PV panels slightly, and it has also obviously elevated the home's use of power. And now we have a choice. We are sitting here at 25%. We're getting that last little bit of charging for the day. Now, because the night air is very still, we know we're going to be running the AC in the evening. Okay, well, so that's going to be an issue because now 25% is barely going to get us until morning. And so then that will wind up, we'll be in a situation where we will have exhausted our charge come morning anyway. So now what's our decision point? Well, our decision point now is what's the best use of our energy? Now, the car is at low charge. I need the car. So the choice now is, do we run the home as normal and deplete the system using home AC and then try and figure out what to do with the car tomorrow, or do we charge the car off of that 25% that we have in the system, bring it to zero, and put that into the car, and then run the home off of whatever grid power we wind up consuming? And so where we're at right now for the week, I'll go ahead and take a quick screenshot of this. Because we were on our trip this previous week, that put us up to 64.9 kilowatt hours to the grid. So if you want to look at it pragmatically on the basis of the in and out for our net metering, we'll still wind up being ahead of the game even by chewing up some power off of the grid this evening. Well, I want to present how many miles we can drive on sunlight. And all of my calculations point out to the fact that electricity is cheaper than gasoline. And so if I'm running my equivalent, I'm going to drive. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and deplete the system totally right now at the end of Total Solar Day, shove it all into the car, and we will continue to drive on sunlight, and we'll see how much power we do wind up using over the course of the evening, and we'll wind up then seeing how much the system is able to recover tomorrow. We're projected to have some lower temperatures, so we should have some better production tomorrow, and we'll see how it goes. And so with that, that's about the exciting bits for this week. So now let's go ahead and head over to the studio and we'll take a look at our 4th week of July in detail. Okay, so I held off on the studio portion of this one additional day so that I could get the final numbers from the Total Solar Day on the 29th. And the reason that I did that was I was curious as to how much difference that 17-degree swing made as far as, you know, truing things up. So I'll show this again when we get there, but on the 28th, I mentioned in the notes that my calculation of 5 to 8% loss due to the heat was actually based on the numbers that we had gotten from a couple of days earlier in the month. Well, since on the 29th it was supposed to peak out at only 90 degrees, I thought, okay, that'll be a good chance to simply use today, the 29th, as a way to do a direct comparison in addition to my other proofs. So I did. The more data you can collect on that, the better. So to quickly go over the highlights for this week, for those who might not want to stick around for the daily walkthrough, the temperatures crept up near the end of the week and triggered something similar to what we had that hot week in June. Right? On the 28th specifically, it got hot enough that the system really just couldn't gain any traction. And so I had to make a decision. Do I charge the car or do I power the house? So we talked about that before when we spoke a little bit about forecasting for the heat. And what do you do? Well, my choice was the car. And obviously that's because of that disparity between how much I pay for electricity to power the home and how much I would pay for gasoline, right? And so again, that's that offset. Where do you get your value for money? Well, I get the value for money by running the car off of sunlight. I'm mostly doing that for you guys. In reality, I would just charge it from electricity somewhere, and so the cost would be relatively the same. And so again, this is going to be one of those things that each individual household will figure out, whether you want to try and run the house and then charge the car elsewhere and pay for that electricity, or if you want to just go ahead and charge the car off of the batteries and then pay for the additional electricity that you use to run the house. It's a wash. Now, I did say in the opening that I depleted the system fully, and that wasn't completely accurate. I actually depleted it to about 7%. My goal was to hit 5%, but I undershot that a little bit. Now, the reason that I wanted to leave the system at 5% was so that I would be certain to get my house past that 8 p.m. Time where the peak rates end. So that part is important, that you would want to make sure that you're not being soaked by that. Make sure that you're getting the best value you can for that stored energy in the batteries. So that just kind of makes sense. And so it did. The system wound up powering the home until about 10 p.m. When the AC finally did it in. The day had been so hot, the air was so still, there was no kind of a breeze in the evening, so I'm relying on either the fan later on in the evening to try and suck some cool air into the house, or relying on the AC to try and tamp that down. So that's what happened. But we made it to 10 o'clock, so that was good. And so then the system started to match solar again around 7 a.m. or so, and then the system began to recover. And again, you'll see that as we go over it later. It peaked around 49% before I had to wind up putting a little bit more charge to the car and brought that back down to 30% for the following day. You see how this works. And so it'd be interesting to see what you would have done in that situation. Leave a comment here and let us know. With that, let's get on to the daily recap. This part of the video gets to be mercifully short because we're starting on the 24th, as we left off there with our last week's recap. So here we go on the 24th. So after coming home and checking on the system, coming home from the trip, and then recording the intro, I actually had to jump right back in the car and run an errand to the Bay Area. We had good production, and so I had managed to put quite a bit to the car. The round trip was, obviously you want to make sure that you have enough so that we can make that trip on sunlight. So I put 22 kilowatt hours to top the car off, and even with that, we managed to send a large portion to the grid. And as it turned out, I'd need that 10.5 kilowatts that the kilowatt hours that the power company was keeping warm for me. We'll get into that in a second. So 177.6 miles driven, good production, 57.3 kilowatt hours. And that's with the system again where it already peaked slightly. And so then we'll take a look here at the notes. And like I said, our last closeout, the best way that I can think to true up the record after the trip was the trip to Minnesota was simply to bring the car home with nearly as much charge as I'd started the trip with, and then we'll just call it even. And so that's what I did. So I'll give you a second with these notes here so you can see basically matches up with what I was saying before. And you can look at that anyway on pause. So let's go ahead and move to the 25th. So here we are on the 25th, the return trip from the Bay Area and some errands. Again, we had good production, ending the day with 63% on our total solar day. And it returned from the Bay Area, like I said, and that required a slug be taken to the car. And so when I started charging kind of late in the day. I was hoping that it would wind up getting most of its charge completed by midnight, but we had about a 5 kilowatt hour spill over to the next day. You'll see that in the notes, and then again on the next day. So the actual home usage was 52.5 kilowatt hours if you subtract that charge to the car. But that was still quite high. The AC was ramping up because of the temperature, and so nothing to or from the grid, as the system was still kind of recovering from that vehicle charge. And then here we have the notes, and again you see that 5% spillover for the day, as I got home about 10:30 from that round trip to the Bay Area and got the charge started a little late. And so we had heavy AC use. The temperature was, 100, 101, something like that. And so we'll go to the 26th. And production was down again due to the heat. That wound up with about 57.4 kilowatt hours. Home usage was also elevated again because of the AC use, 48.3 kilowatt hours. And I had to make a trip out of town to videotape Tomas's install. That was a lot of fun, and we'll be showing that a little bit later. And so charging the car was unavoidable. Nearly twice was pulled out of the system that went in, and so obviously I'm starting to knock down at our reserve. And so what I didn't expect though was that on the 27th and 28th they'd be well over 100 degrees. And on the 28th we peaked at 107 degrees. We'll show that in a minute here. And here's the notes for the 26th. And again, as it says in the notes, I should have been more aware of the heat in the forecast. It wasn't like I wasn't aware. We discussed that earlier about how you can do a pretty good predictive analysis when the weather is predicting temperatures over 100 degrees. But when I checked the forecast several days before, I was tired from getting back from the trip and all of that, and just didn't register, I guess. So, and so here is the 27th, and the 27th was also bad. And so again, note the production. This wasn't due to cloudy weather. That sometimes happens too, where you get those upper level clouds affecting your production, and you can tell that that's the case when you look at your solar graph where it is spiky. This was a nice smooth graph, but it was all loss of efficiency due to nothing but the heat. 55.9 kilowatt hours, and then my mistake here was in taking a charge to the car, but as you'll see in the notes, that wasn't really avoidable. And so that elevated the home use to just under 42 kilowatt hours. And so then here's the notes. And so even with the charge of 16 kilowatt hours to the car following the day's travel and visiting that friend in a nearby town for the evening, the end of day percentage was still only 19%. So this brings us to the 28th, when things got really bad. And so like you see here, 55.3 kilowatt hours. The peak from the panels is identical to the previous day, and these 2 days were 105 degrees and 107 degrees respectively. And so also shown is the elevated home usage of just under 50 kilowatt hours to keep the house cool. And then again, like I said, the still air in the evening meant that there was little to do but to turn the AC on in the evening. And this forced a decision to charge the car for use and have the home take on some power from the grid. The home ran until about 10 p.m. and then it wound up taking 2.9 kilowatt hours by midnight. And so here's the notes for that. Again, same thing I just said, 5 to 8% reduction in output from the heat coupled with the increased AC use. Let's look at that for a second here. And so then that brings us to the evening on the 29th. And not all the data is in yet for today. I usually compile these videos after midnight or on the following day of total solar day, so that I can be sure that I give you guys all the numbers. But I've got a lot of videos in the pipeline here, and so we'll go ahead and just take a look at it as is. But starting with a 0% charge in the system, we used 9.5 kilowatt hours from the grid until solar started matching the home usage in the morning around 7 a.m. And this gives us a total use from the grid for this past solar day at 12.4 kilowatt hours. Basically, what we put into the vehicle, as we see here in the notes, if we had not charged the vehicle, then we would have probably made it until daylight. But like I said, I needed the car, and so here's the notes. And I suppose, like I said, I could have curtailed the AC, but it's important to me to keep the house comfortable for my mother. So that defeats the purpose of the test if I monkey around with the system just to try and alter performance results. That's not what we're here for. So this is what it is. It's the result of the heat. No different than what we get as the result of cold or cloudy weather, really. So, and that's it for week 4. And in a few days I'll do a recap for the month, but that recap might be delayed a couple of days. I've got quite a few videos in the pipeline. We've got our efficiency review, some very interesting data in there I think that you guys will be interested in. Also the install video for Tomas. I'm putting that together, and then folks were interested in seeing what our trip to Minnesota looked like, and so I've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline. We'll try and get that out to you as soon as possible, and as always, best of luck with your own systems, and we'll get these other videos out to you as soon as we can.